Welcome into another Fountain Report conversation. I'm Matt Bubala here with David McCormick. He's a veterinary practice valuator and broker with Simmons and Associates. Thank you so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
So tell me about valuations right now. We had some glory days recently. Are things still as crazy good as they were? Are we coming back to earth a little bit?
That's a great question. And I think what's important to recognize, there are two very separate markets for practices. So there's fair market value, which is where practices sell from doctor to doctor. That market does not change very significantly. Practice values, profitability have been coming down a little bit, but it's a very stable market. What you're referring to right now is the investment market. That's where corporations buy. And yes, 4 years ago, it was 2 times what it was now. It's still dramatically higher than fair market value. If we use the reference at fair market value, people like to say 5 times the bottom line. Corporate pricing right now is 9 to 12. If you're a bigger practice, 13, 14, 15, it depends on what's negotiated. So both markets are still very active, both the doctor and doctor market as well as the corporate market. The challenge for many practice owners, they want to sell to their associate, but they want the big corporate dollar. And it's either or. The associates can't pay what the corporations can, but they're both very active, very healthy markets.
So valuations used to be double, tripled, 10 times higher. We would hear things like that when they were being sold. Not as crazy now, but still really good market. How do you truly know the valuation of your practice?
Well, the core fair market value, we can quantify that. It's precisely defined by the IRS and Revenue Ruling 5960. We have precise methodologies to determine the value of that business. Investment value, the corporate, that's a price. And it's a price to that buyer, and every buyer will give you a different price. So on fair market value, what I recommend on an ongoing basis, every owner should have their practice valued every 3 to 5 years. Veterinarians recommend annual wellness exams for animals. This is a financial wellness exam for your practice, because fair market value, that's your foundation. You can sell it at that price to any doctor, and that allows you to plan your exit. And once you know what your floor or the fair market standard is, then you can extrapolate to what the corporate pricing is likely to be.
Do you get into advice when it comes to that? Because if you're selling doctor to doctor, it's going to be one way, but there might be somebody that wants to offer you a lot more. Yeah. I imagine whether you're going to stay and keep practicing, all sorts of factors go into how you help somebody make that decision.
Yeah, most definitely. That's a part of the valuation process and why we recommend every 3 to 5 years. I'm a fan of making decisions with full knowledge of the relevant facts. You can't plan your exit if you don't know what the value is. And so as part of that, discussing what are your options? If you are a practice owner, what are the exit options? What about selling to your associate? Pros and cons. What about selling to another doctor? What about the corporate? Corporate has the high dollars, but there are strings attached. It's not all cash. There's equity, there's promissory notes. The seller has to stay 3 to 5 years, and your associates have to stay. And so it's a big number, but there's a lot of components that have to fall into place to make it real.
So much talk in the last number of years about corporate practice ownership and corporates buying up practices. I'm hearing more and more of a resurgence on either buying private practice and working it privately or opening up a brand new practice. Where is the state of that right now?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement. When we first started about 25 years ago, ownership was a big driving variable. Since then, the pendulum swung away from that. The last 3 years, we're starting to see the pendulum come back into ownership. I want to do it my way. I don't want to work for someone else. I want the control, the responsibility. They're not doing it motivated out of money. That just happens when you do it well. But the pendulum is coming back. So the interest in ownership, especially through things like the VBMAs, the Veterinary Business Management Association chapters at every vet school, the education and the awareness of ownership. So that's coming back, which is exciting. And we are seeing people both buy practices more frequently and look for practices, as well as startups. Certainly between buy or startup, If you're going to borrow a similar amount of money, but if you buy an existing practice, it has a track record. It's generating profit that will pay the debt. Startup, you're going to borrow it in hopes. So if you're going to start, you really need to make sure there's need or demand and do your work in advance. Buying the practice, and that's one of the neat things about fair market value that future owners don't necessarily understand. We're fortunate in our profession that we have veterinary specific lenders. Buyers, if they're credit worthy and they're out of school at least 2 or 3 years, they'll get 100% financing on the practice and the real estate. The practice will pay for itself over 10 years, the real estate over 20 years, and we have veterinary lenders that will loan the money with an incredibly low default rate. Less than 0.5% of veterinary loans default. So it's really, for the future owners out there, you're kind of stepping into ownership with a lot of people holding your hands to make it work.
David McCormick, veterinary practice valuator and broker with Simmons and Associates. Thank you so much for sharing your time today.
My pleasure.
That's another Fountain Report Conversation. I'm Matt Bubala. Thank you so much for being with us.